Thank you so much. Folks, today's talk is predicated on one simple idea, and that is that poverty is overrated. Do you agree with that sentiment? Yeah? Yeah, then you're in the right room. Fantastic. Our follow-up thought to that one is this. I believe that the difference between wealth and poverty is not measured in an amount of coins. It is measured in mindset. The difference between the two is not the amount of coins you have available, it is the mindset with which you approach the subject matter. By way of a simple example, you have a person who has lived their life in poverty and they consider themselves poor. You have another person who has great amounts of wealth, loses it, and then returns from that base back up to where they were. And for a period of time, they had a shortage of coins, but they didn't see themselves as poor at that point in time. They merely had a shortage in coins. And I believe that there is a world of difference between those two ideas. And I've spent the last 20 years or so trying to unravel the thoughts that have been handed down to me from previous generations on how we think about wealth and earning money. And it's amazing how much of this stuff is completely unexamined. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I witnessed a really bad day for some wealthy individual. I was driving in the Michalisburg area, and I witnessed an accident between a VW Golf and a Ferrari. Now, this is not something that you see every day, and I'm a great car lover, and I put this up on Facebook and Twitter, and I said something at the time like, let's hold a moment of silence for the mighty fallen. And the reactions that I received from my friends and people that I knew baffled me. Because the level of hatred aimed at this Ferrari driver was disproportionate to anything that I had said on Facebook. I made a comment, something down the lines of, let's hold a moment of silence for the mighty fallen that will never again go from 0 to 100 in 3.2 seconds. And the level of vitriolic hatred that I received back was just something else. People said things like, the first one was, serves him right. Interesting, isn't it? Now, I had given no information about who was right or who was wrong. Maybe a dog had run across the road, we don't know. But apparently if you drive a VW, you're an acceptable human being. But if you drive a Ferrari, you're stealing from poor people. That's the level of thinking out there. One person stopped just short of calling him a child molester. I mean, it was dramatic stuff. And it got me thinking about how we react to people who have accumulated wealth. And if you ever watch Top Gear, Jeremy Clarkson had an interesting comment on this one. He says in the United States, they've got a handle on this idea. If you are walking along in the US and you see someone driving past in, say, a Bentley, people will look at it and say, one day I'll be in a car like that. And he says in the UK, they'll see someone drive past in the same car and they'll say, one day I'll have him out of that. Interesting. And you think to yourself, why do we think like that? How have we arrived at this point where we believe that someone who is wealthy is obviously stealing from the poor? And I believe I have an interesting answer to that. And I call this philosophy the wheelbarrow way. It's a type of thinking that gets handed down from generation to generation, especially through working class families. And it keeps generations poor. Let me show you how this worked in my own family. If we go back 3 generations, back to about the time that the UK and Germany were having the second of their 2 large disagreements, my grandmother was working as a manor servant, a maid servant in a manor house in the UK, just outside of Manchester. And she wore the full maid's regalia. It was everything that today we associate with that kinky French stereotype. She had the little feather duster and the little outfit and the whole trip. But our image of what that was like is entirely wrong. Because the reality of the thing was, this was a woman who had calluses on her hands, more often than not. This was a person who woke up every day with a sore back from the intense manual physical labor that she used to do. And perhaps most importantly, this was a person who had no voice in the face of authority in the time period in which she lived. And when it came time to hand down ideas on work and wealth and how to live your life to the next generation, she went rummaging around in her mental filing cabinets, and she came out with 2 things, a blessing and a curse. And these are the 2 things that she then handed down to my father, and the thinking is handed down generation to generation. Now, the blessing is a Protestant work ethic about the idea that says, go out there and make something of your life on purpose. Use your hours productively and work hard. And it says that work is a noble thing. And I like that. That's the blessing. The curse is middle-class thinking about how to generate wealth. And it comes in little phrases like this. You might have heard this one somewhere down the lines among your family structure. It says things like, "My son, get a trade, and you will never starve to death." Does that sound at all familiar? In one shape or form, we have all heard that one. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting a trade. You can end up very wealthy getting a trade. But join me in the second half of that sentence, where the orientation is it so that you'll prosper, so that you'll fulfill yourself, so that you'll become something meaningful in this world? No, it's so that you don't starve to death. And the thinking comes from such a place of desperation. It's absolutely fascinating to me. And what tends to happen is that we are taught to earn what I call the wheelbarrow way. And it goes like this. Essentially what we're saying is, "My son, you are young and strong. Pick up your wheelbarrow. If you want to earn a coin, you must push your wheelbarrow for an hour. If you want to earn a second coin, you have to push your wheelbarrow for a second hour. And if at the end of a day, you discover that you're not breaking even, well, my son, you must get yourself a second wheelbarrow in the evenings and push it around for more hours in order to earn more coins." And the emphasis is on how hard you work, not on intelligent ways to make money. Because among working class thinking, we start to think that work itself is noble, but money is embarrassing. Money is something that we don't talk of. We don't talk about how to generate wealth and how to become wealthy families going forward. We talk about how noble the work is. Now, the wealthy man's epiphany is this: dump the bricks in your wheelbarrow and start carrying gold. Now, what is the difference between those two? Well, it says that instead of placing the emphasis on how hard you work hour to hour, you raise the value of what you do within an hour. And that single epiphany, I believe, is the thing that keeps the working classes from ever becoming wealthy. That one idea. You have to raise the value of what it is that you do. And there are a number of ways that you can do this. In fact, 3 particular ones spring to mind for me. The first is be the boss. If you're the boss, you exponentially multiply what you do. You've got people working for you, helping to raise the value of your labor. Number 2 is raise the value of your own hourly labor. For example, if you work for a large corporate company, it might be add a degree to your name, add a qualification to your name. Be seen speaking in public. Be seen taking on and resolving problems. Be seen in leadership roles. And by raising your own profile, you raise your earning potential. So that's number 2. But number 3, and perhaps the smartest one, is escape the hour concept entirely. And that's the kind of thinking that says, I'm going to do something once, and then it's going to multiply out into the world. I'll give you a very unusual example of someone who did this exceedingly well. In Forbes magazine this year, the 4th highest posthumous earner, dead celebrity, is John Lennon of the Beatles. Do you know who came in at number 3, beating John Lennon? It's a gentleman named Charles Schulz. Do you have any idea who Charles Schulz is?
Peanuts.
The author of Peanuts, yes, Charlie Brown's dad. Now think about this one for just a moment. That man sat down in the 1950s and he started drawing a 3-panel cartoon strip. And then every day he sold his 3-panel cartoon strip to some 10,000 newspapers around the world. And at the end of every year, they would collect those cartoon strips and publish them as a book. And then you walk into any Cardi's branch around the world and count the amount of Peanuts merchandise that you see. He is the 3rd highest earning dead guy of all time. And all he did was draw a 3-panel cartoon strip. But what he understood was it's not about how many hours you push the wheelbarrow. And that's the first of the fallacies that are passed down to us in terms of our thinking about work and wealth, is the wheelbarrow way. The second one I call the finite pool fallacy. The finite pool fallacy, which says this: I am poor because you are rich. Now this one might hit home for you guys, because I actually encountered a young lady, 23, 24 years old, who she's just about to get her law degree, but her husband is quite wealthy. So she told her friends and told her family that she'll finish her degree, but she's not going to work, because she believes that she'll be taking away from someone else. And I thought that's a fascinating way of looking at the world, because it's based on this idea that there is a finite pool of money. It's like assuming that you live in a village that only has so many coins, and if I take a coin, someone else has to lose a coin. I believe that the opposite applies. I believe that work generates wealth. The more people we have out there using their skills and working, the broader the tax base becomes, the more the government is able to prosper, the more we're able to help others. I believe that it grows money rather than taking money out of the system. This young lady is coming from a really good place. She thinks she's doing the right thing to help others. She believes that she is ceasing to steal from the world. I believe that by not working, she is very slightly ceasing to contribute to the world. I think there is a world of difference between those two ideas. And the third idea that I'd like to share with you, this fallacy that is handed down to us, is that I call it the bean counter in the cave. Imagine the company. This is an organization that's run by people who are raised by the middle class, and they've all been handed these ideas about work and wealth. And what happens is we get to tough times, we hit a recession, and the first thing that happens is the bean counter sits the clan down in the cave, and they say, we only have 3 buffalo left. We've got to make it through the winter on these 3 buffalo, and we already know that 3 buffalo is not enough to make it to the end of winter. So we're going to hunker down and survive. Now the hunters in the cave have a very different idea. They say, give us one of the buffalo for strength, and send us out hunting for more. But in any organization anywhere around the world, you will always have the bean counter in the cave who says, no, we have to conserve the 3 buffalo that we have. Think about it this way. If you already have less than what you need to survive, no amount of plugging holes is going to get you through the winter. You have to go hunting. And that's the difference between watching your bottom line and watching your top line. During times of recession, during times of financial hardship, we get incensed, we get fanatical about the bottom line and plugging holes. I believe we should apportion it only in incidental energy. Take 80% of your energy and apportion it to hunting for new buffalo. 20% of your energy can go to plugging the holes, watching the bottom line. But unless you increase the top line, you're not going to make it through the winter. And these are the kinds of ideas that are handed down to us from generation to generation, and we're not aware of them, we never think of them. In fact, all that happens is we watch the Ferrari go by, and we think, I'm poor, because he's rich. And we don't examine the thinking handed down to us.